The sun blazed mercilessly over Oak Ridge Community Pool, transforming the concrete deck into a shimmering landscape of heat and tension. Marcus Thompson adjusted his navy blue swim trunks, his dark skin glistening with a thin layer of perspiration. At 17, he moved with the confident grace of a young man who knew himself, intelligent, purposeful, aware. He'd been looking forward to this day all week. Finals were over, summer had begun, and a group of his friends had planned to meet at the pool. Marcus carried a well-worn canvas bag containing his towel, water bottle, and a dog-eared copy of Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me, a constant companion that spoke to his experiences as a young black man navigating a world designed to challenge his existence. As he approached the entrance, Marcus noticed the subtle shifts around him. A woman clutching her beach bag moved slightly to the side. An older man's gaze lingered a moment too long, his eyes tracking Marcus's movements with an unmistakable wariness. These microaggressions were familiar, a constant background noise in his life, like a low-frequency hum that never quite disappeared. Marcus recognized these moments for what they were, small manifestations of a larger system. He'd spent years in his school's social justice club, organizing discussions, leading awareness campaigns. He understood that these interactions were never just about him. They were about something deeper, more systemic. "Can I help you?" The pool attendant's voice cut through Marcus's thoughts. There was an edge to the question, not quite hostile, but definitely not welcoming. "I am here to meet my friends," Marcus responded evenly, his voice calm and clear. He pulled out his community pool membership card, a laminated testament to his belonging. The attendant's eyes flickered over the card, then back to Marcus. Something unspoken passed between them, a tension that hung in the air like heat rising from concrete. It was then that she appeared, mid-40s, blonde, wearing an expensive-looking white swimsuit that seemed more suited to a country club than a community pool. Her eyes locked onto Marcus with a mixture of discomfort and deliberate challenge. "Excuse me," she said, her voice pitched to carry. "I'm not comfortable with this." Marcus knew exactly what "this" meant. He'd heard variations of this language his entire life, coded words that masked deeper prejudices. "Is there a problem?" he asked, maintaining his composure. The woman's response was immediate and calculated. She pulled out her phone, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. "I'm calling management," she announced, her voice rising. "I don't feel safe." Ha! Around them, the pool area began to change. People who had been casually swimming or sunbathing now watched with a mixture of curiosity and tension. Marcus felt the weight of their gazes, some sympathetic, others judgmental, most uncomfortably neutral. Within minutes, 2 local police officers arrived. Their approach was deliberate, their body language communicating more than their words ever could. Marcus knew this dance. He'd studied it, discussed it, prepared for moments exactly like this. "Sir, we've received a complaint," the first officer said, his hand resting casually near his belt. A gesture that was anything but casual. Marcus took a deep breath. He knew that his next words, his next movements could transform this moment from a potential confrontation into something far more dangerous. His mind raced with the stories he'd heard, the statistics he'd studied about interactions between young black men and law enforcement. "I'm a member here," he said slowly, carefully producing his membership card again. "I've done nothing wrong." But Marcus also knew that membership, documentation, perfect behavior, these were never guarantees of safety or respect. The afternoon sun continued to beat down, turning the pool area into a pressure cooker of racial tension, unspoken histories, and potential violence. Marcus stood at the center of it all, a young black man facing a moment that would define not just his day, but potentially his understanding of his place in the world. The blue police cruiser pulled up to the pool's entrance with a calculated precision that made Marcus's stomach tighten. Two officers emerged, a tall white male in his mid-40s and a shorter Hispanic woman who looked to be in her early 30s. Their approach was deliberate, their eyes scanning the pool area with a practiced neutrality that Marcus recognized all too well. He gripped the edge of his chair, the book Between the World and Me pressed against his leg, a silent testament to the countless conversations about Black survival he'd internalized. His mind raced, recalling his parents' countless discussions about interactions with law enforcement. Stay calm, keep your hands visible, speak clearly and respectfully. "Sir, we need to ask you some questions," the older white officer said, his tone hovering between official and accusatory. Marcus took a deep breath. "I'm a registered community pool member," he responded evenly, pulling out his membership card. The plastic rectangle felt like his only shield in that moment, a thin barrier between himself and potential escalation. The female officer studied the card, then looked back at Marcus. "Ma'am," she addressed the white woman who had initiated the complaint, "can you confirm your specific concerns?" The woman, clutching her beach bag like a weapon, stammered something about feeling uncomfortable and threatened, words Marcus had heard countless times before. They were never about actual danger, but about the perceived threat of his very existence. Internally, Marcus felt a familiar sequence of emotions surge through him. Initial anger, then a calculated calm, then a deep generational weariness. This wasn't just about this moment, this was about centuries of systematic dehumanization. "I haven't done anything wrong," Marcus stated, his voice steady. "I'm a high school senior, here legally, with a valid membership." The flashback came unbidden, memories of his father's lessons about navigating white spaces, about maintaining composure even when every instinct screamed at injustice. His father's voice echoed, "Your dignity is your armor. Never let them see you lose control." The older officer's hand hovered near his utility belt, a subtle but unmistakable gesture of potential threat. Marcus knew the statistics. Black men were 2.5 times more likely to be killed by law enforcement, and in this moment he was acutely aware of how quickly a pool deck could become a crime scene. "We're going to need you to come with us," the white officer said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. Marcus's mind raced. He knew his rights. He knew this was potentially illegal. But he also knew that knowing your rights and surviving the moment were two very different things. "Am I being detained?" Marcus asked, his voice measured. "If not, I'd like to remain here with my pool membership and documentation." The tension was palpable. Other pool-goers watched, some averting their eyes, others staring with a mix of curiosity and discomfort. Marcus understood he was no longer just Marcus Thompson Slayton. He was a symbol, a moment, a potential headline. His phone was recording, tucked subtly in his bag. Documentation had become as essential as breathing in these moments. The female officer conferred quietly with her partner, their whispers just out of Marcus's hearing range. The white woman who had initiated the complaint watched with a mixture of vindication and unease. Marcus knew this moment was bigger than him. It was about every black body that had been forcibly removed from spaces deemed white. The pool wasn't just water. It was a battlefield of historical and contemporary racial demarcation. His heart raced, but his exterior remained calm. Years of debate club, of understanding rhetoric and power dynamics, had prepared him for precisely this type of confrontation. The next few moments would determine not just his afternoon, but potentially his entire trajectory of understanding power, race, and resistance. The phone call crackled with emotion, Marcus's voice trembling slightly as he recounted the pool incident to his mother, Diane Thompson. Her measured breathing on the other end of the line spoke volumes. A mixture of maternal concern, barely contained anger, and the weary familiarity of a black mother who had prepared her son for moments like these his entire life. "Mom, they They just removed me from the pool, Marcus said, his fingers tracing the edge of the book he'd been reading, Between the World and Me, now lying on the kitchen counter. The irony wasn't lost on him. Ethan saw Marcus oblivious to the tears holding his eyes as he spoke about the game he'd been playing. Diane Thompson was no stranger to systemic racism. A longtime community organizer and high school history teacher, she had spent her career teaching students about the ongoing struggle for civil rights. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was calm but resolute. "Tell me everything, every single detail." As Marcus narrated the encounter, the white woman's complaint, the police officer's intimidating approach, the humiliation of being singled out, his father, Robert, entered the kitchen. A civil engineer with a quiet but steely determination, Robert listened intently, his hand resting on Marcus's shoulder. "This isn't just about you, son," Robert said, after Marcus finished. "This is about a system that continues to criminalize black bodies in public spaces. Pools have always been battlegrounds for racial justice." Diane nodded, her mind already strategizing. "We need documentation. Did you record anything? Take any photographs?" Marcus pulled out his phone, showing the limited video he had managed to capture. The footage was shaky, but clear enough to demonstrate the unwarranted intervention. "I tried to be careful. You both always told me to document everything." The family's conversation quickly transformed from a moment of personal trauma to a strategic discussion. They knew this wasn't just an isolated incident, but part of a larger narrative of systemic oppression. "We're calling Gerald," Diane declared, referring to Gerald Mitchell, a prominent local civil rights attorney they had worked with on previous community initiatives. "This needs to be more than just a personal complaint. This is about challenging the structural racism embedded in these public spaces." Marcus felt a complex mixture of emotions: anger, vulnerability, but also a growing sense of purpose. This wasn't just happening to him, this was happening to a community, to a history of resistance. Robert made a quick call to Gerald, providing initial details. Within an hour, Mitchell would be at their home, ready to discuss potential legal strategies. The Thompson family understood that their response needed to be calculated, powerful, and transformative. "Remember," Diane told Marcus, her hand holding his, "your resilience is a form of resistance. They want to silence you, isolate you. By documenting, by speaking out, you're already winning." Marcus pulled out a notebook, beginning to write down every detail of the encounter. Date, time, names of officers if he could recall them, descriptions of the woman who complained. Each written word felt like an act of reclaiming power. The kitchen, usually a space of family warmth and shared meals, had transformed into a war room of sorts. Maps of local community centers were spread out, contact lists for civil rights organizations were being compiled, and a narrative of resistance was being constructed. "This isn't just about getting justice for me," Marcus said, looking at his parents. "This is about creating change." His mother smiled, a smile that was both proud and determined. "Exactly," she said. "That's how movements begin, one story at a time." The afternoon light filtering through the kitchen window seemed to capture the moment, a black family turning personal pain into collective power, another chapter in a long, ongoing story of resistance and hope. The conference room at the local community center buzzed with a mixture of tension and anticipation. Marcus sat at the center of a long table, flanked by his parents and two civil rights lawyers from the Urban Justice Coalition. The morning sunlight filtered through Venetian blinds, casting sharp lines across the room that seemed to mirror the stark divisions they were about to challenge. Mr. Rodriguez, the lead attorney, spread several documents across the table. His fingers traced the edges of police reports and pool membership records. "The key here," he explained, his voice measured and deliberate, "is to demonstrate a pattern of systemic discrimination, not just an isolated incident." Marcus's mother, Diane Thompson, leaned forward, Her eyes, usually warm, now burned with a determined intensity. "This isn't just about Marcus," she said. "This is about every black child who has been made to feel unwelcome in public spaces that should belong to everyone." The story of Marcus's pool encounter had spread quickly. Local news channels had picked up the narrative, and social media was ablaze with discussions about racial profiling and community safety. What had begun as a personal trauma was now transforming into a broader movement. A knock at the door interrupted their strategy session. A young journalist from the local newspaper entered, notebook in hand. "Marcus," she began, "can you tell me how this experience has affected you?" Marcus took a deep breath. The weight of becoming a public symbol of resistance was not lost on him. He thought about the book by Ta-Nehisi Coates he'd been reading, about the constant negotiation of black identity in white spaces. "It's not just about me being removed from a pool," he said carefully. "It's about the message that sends. It's about who gets to feel safe, who gets to belong." The room fell silent. Each person understood the layers of meaning behind his words. By midday, a community meeting had been organized. The local community center was packed, a diverse crowd of supporters, activists, and concerned citizens. Marcus sat at the front, his posture straight but not rigid, a visual representation of both vulnerability and strength. Local civil rights activists spoke. Community leaders shared similar experiences. The pool incident became a focal point for a broader conversation about institutional racism. "This isn't an isolated incident," declared Regina Williams, a veteran civil rights attorney. "This is a systemic issue that requires systemic change." Marcus listened, absorbing the collective energy. He was simultaneously the catalyst and a witness to this moment of potential transformation. The emotional toll was significant. Each speech, each story of discrimination reopened wounds, but also offered a path toward healing. Behind the scenes, legal preparations were intense. Mr. Rodriguez and his team were building a comprehensive case. They were collecting evidence, interviewing witnesses, documenting the pattern of discriminatory behavior at the Oak Ridge community pool. "We're not just seeking individual justice," Mr. Rodriguez explained to Marcus during a quiet moment. "We're challenging a system that has normalized these experiences for too long." As the day progressed, Marcus found himself at the center of a growing movement. Phone interviews, community meetings, strategy sessions. Each moment was a delicate balance between personal trauma and public advocacy. His parents watched with a mixture of pride and concern. They understood the weight of what was unfolding. Their son was no longer just fighting a personal battle, but had become a symbol of resistance. By evening, the initial shock of the pool incident had transformed into an organized, strategic response. Media coverage was expanding, bringing national attention to the local issue. Marcus was learning to navigate this new landscape, part activist, part witness, part symbol of a larger struggle. The day ended with a sense of potential, not a guarantee of victory, but a commitment to continue fighting. Marcus understood that this was more than a legal battle. It was a conversation about belonging, about dignity, about the very definition of community. As night fell, he looked out the window of the community center, seeing the city in a new light, not just as a place of challenges, but as a potential site of transformation. The municipal hearing room buzzed with tension, a microcosm of the broader social conflict that had brought Marcus Thompson to this moment. Rows of wooden chairs filled with community members, local activists, and media representations created a backdrop of expectant silence. Marcus sat at the front, his posture both defensive and dignified, a living testimony to the systemic racism he had experienced. Civil rights attorney Sandra Rodriguez leaned close, her voice a quiet reassurance. "Remember, Marcus, this isn't just about your individual experience. This is about exposing a pattern of discrimination that has existed far too long." Marcus nodded, his fingers tracing the edge of his statement. The document before him was more than just words. It was a map of institutional racism, carefully documented and meticulously researched. Each paragraph represented not just his personal encounter, but the collective experiences of countless Black individuals who had been systematically marginalized in public spaces. When he was called to speak, Marcus stood with a composure that belied his 17 years. The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on the young man who had become an unexpected symbol of resistance. What happened at Oak Ridge Community Pool wasn't an isolated incident, Marcus began, his voice steady and clear. It was a manifestation of a deeper, more insidious problem: the consistent dehumanization of Black bodies in spaces that are supposed to be public and welcoming. He detailed the encounter with clinical precision: the white woman's complaint, the police officer's unwarranted intervention, the humiliation of being removed from a space he had every right to occupy. But more than just recounting events, Marcus contextualized the incident within a broader historical narrative of racial segregation and systemic oppression. Seated across the room, the woman who had initiated the complaint shifted uncomfortably. Her initial confidence had eroded, replaced by a growing awareness of the broader implications of her actions. Sandra Rodriguez presented additional evidence: security camera footage, witness statements, and data showing a pattern of discriminatory practices at the pool. Each piece of evidence was a surgical strike against institutional racism, dismantling the facade of neutrality that often protected discriminatory systems. The most powerful moment came when Marcus directly addressed the woman who had called the police. "You didn't see me as a person," he said, his voice a blend of anger and profound sadness. "You saw a threat, a stereotype. But I am a human being, with dreams, with a family, with a right to exist in public spaces." The room was so quiet that one could hear the slight tremor in Marcus's voice, a testament to the emotional weight of his experience. His parents, Robert and Diane Thompson, sat behind him. Their presence was a silent source of strength, embodying generations of resistance and resilience. Diane, a veteran community organizer, watched with a mixture of pride and renewed determination. The hearing wasn't just a legal proceeding, it was a trial of social consciousness, a moment that demanded the community confront its deeply embedded racial biases. As Marcus concluded his testimony, something shifted in the room. It wasn't just about one incident at a swimming pool anymore. It was about recognizing and dismantling the invisible barriers that continued to divide communities. When he sat down, there was a moment of profound silence. Then, almost imperceptibly, a soft applause began, first from a few individuals, then spreading across the room like a wave of collective understanding. Marcus knew this was just the beginning. The fight for true equality, for genuine inclusion, was ongoing. But in this moment, he had transformed a personal trauma into a powerful narrative of resistance and hope. The municipal hearing room, with its harsh fluorescent lights and official bureaucratic atmosphere, had become something else entirely: a space of potential transformation, of confronting uncomfortable truths, and of imagining a more just future. The sunlight filtered through the community center's large windows, casting a warm glow on Marcus Thompson's face. He sat at the front of the packed room, no longer the scared teenager from that summer day at the pool, but a symbol of resilience and change. The legal proceedings had concluded, and the aftermath was more profound than he could have imagined. The civil rights lawsuit against the Oak Ridge Community Pool had been successful, not just a personal victory, but a systemic one. The court's decision mandated comprehensive anti-discrimination training for staff, established clear guidelines for pool access, and imposed significant penalties for racial profiling. Marcus watched as his mother Diane fielded questions from local journalists, her voice steady and purposeful. "This isn't just about one incident," Diane was saying, her words carefully chosen. "This is about creating spaces of genuine inclusion and dismantling the invisible barriers that have existed for far too long." Marcus reflected on the journey. What had begun as a traumatic moment of rejection had transformed into a catalyst for community change. The media coverage had been relentless, bringing national attention to local instances of systemic racism. Civil rights organizations had rallied around his story, using it as a powerful example of institutional discrimination. His phone buzzed. A text from his civil rights attorney, James Reynolds, congratulated him. "You've changed more than just one pool's policy," the message read. "You've opened a conversation that needed to happen." The emotional toll had been significant. Therapy sessions had helped Marcus process the layers of trauma, not just from the pool incident, but from years of accumulated microaggressions and systemic challenges. He had learned to transform pain into purpose, to see his experience as part of a larger narrative of resistance and hope. A young activist approached him, her eyes bright with admiration. "How does it feel to make such a difference?" she asked. Marcus paused, choosing his words carefully. "It's not about feeling powerful," he responded. "It's about understanding that our individual stories are connected to a broader struggle for justice." The community center buzzed with energy. Representatives from local schools, civic organizations, and civil rights groups were discussing next steps. Marcus realized his experience had become more than a personal story. It was now a movement. His father, Robert, placed a supportive hand on his shoulder. "You've shown incredible strength," he said quietly, "not just for yourself, but for everyone who has ever felt marginalized." As the day progressed, Marcus understood that transformation wasn't just about legal victories or policy changes. It was about shifting perspectives, challenging ingrained biases, and creating spaces where dignity was a fundamental right, not a privilege. The final resolution went beyond the pool. The city had committed to reviewing public space policies, developing comprehensive anti-discrimination training, and establishing citizen oversight committees. Marcus's experience had become a blueprint for systemic change. Watching the room filled with people from diverse backgrounds united in a commitment to justice, Marcus felt a profound sense of hope. The pool incident, which had once represented a moment of profound vulnerability, now symbolized the potential for collective healing and progress. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the community center, Marcus understood that this was not an ending, but a beginning. His story was part of a larger narrative of resistance, resilience, and hope, a testament to the power of speaking truth and challenging systemic inequalities. The journey continued, one step at a time.